कि आप लोग okay, thanks. Assalamu alaikum, good evening, everybody who has joined us. On behalf of Rhine Indus Global Forum, we cordially welcome our guests, speakers, and all followers and viewers who are watching us live. As you know, हम आज गुफ्तगू करने जा रहे हैं. The topic is post-Trump America, challenges or chances for Democrats. इस मौजू पर गुफ्तगू करने के लिए हमने पाकिस्तान से, अमेरिका से एक्सपर्ट्स, एनालिस्ट को इकट्ठा किया है. उम्मीद है आपको ये गुफ्तगू पसंद आएगी. Our session will be actually bilingual और जो जिसमें इजी फील करे, क्योंकि हमारा टारगेट ऑडियंस बहरहाल पाकिस्तान और हिंदुस्तान और वो इलाके हैं जहाँ पे लोग इस वक्त ज़्यादा दिलचस्पी ले रहे हैं इस मौजू पर. So I will start the discussion with Professor Sam Sayyed's views as an historian. Let me briefly give you the introduction of our speakers of today's session. So Professor Sam Sayyed is a renowned historian and he has lived in the US. I think most of his academic life he has spent over there teaching in Ivy League universities. And he's a philosopher, he's professor of history and philosophy. Then we have a senior analyst and journalist who is not only very popular in his home country, Pakistan. He lives in Washington, D.C., and you know him, Anwar Iqbal. We are glad to have you, Anwar Sam. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Today you will listen to a very interesting discourse. An analyst, a researcher, and author of a book, Countering the Western Hegemony, Abdul Sattar. He is joining us from Islamabad. Thank you, Sattar, for your time. Looking forward to having an interesting discussion with you.
Thank you.
So we can start our discussion actually with historical perspective of democracy in America. So I would like Professor Sayyed to give us a short view of how he looks at the history of democracy in the US and how is the political atmosphere is changing after these new elections and the results. Professor Sam Sayyed, please.
Thank you, Madam. It's wonderful to see Anwar Iqbal Saab, Mona Kazim, Abdul Sattar. My view on democracy in America dates back to a book that I read long ago, Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. I will not quote from that book, but I'll tell you how this idea of democracy has evolved in the United States, what challenges it had. This is not the first challenge that Joe Biden is going to face after Trump. The American presidents before him have faced many challenges. America as a nation has faced many challenges. The first challenge was when they were writing the Constitution. What kind of rights would the state like who are going to join the Union? Anyway, after long discussion, it was approved in September 1787, and the Constitution came into operation after 2 years. The first major thing on which Americans are very proud, and our former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto also used to say that there are three most beautiful words in American Constitution: we the people. What did they mean, the founding fathers, by we the people? All people or just white people? Everybody, worker, peasant, or just aristocrats? Later American history tells us that no, they did not include everybody. It was only a selected group of aristocrats who were enshrined in this famous statement, we the people. The first test of this came when we realized that there were no voting rights for the blacks. So, this was the first challenge that Abraham Lincoln had to face in 1861 when some states in the South decided that we have the right to retain slaves if we want, and the federal government has no right to interfere. Many historians claim that it was essentially an economic war because slaves were like free workers, whereas industrialists North had to pay to their workers. Anyway, without going into those controversies, Lincoln fought the war, won the war. 1865 passed what we call as Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, it was not enacted in the spirit because the man who succeeded Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, was a great protector of state rights. So while the blacks were given the right to vote, the states were allowed to enact what they call Black Code. Black Code literally discriminated against the blacks. It controlled them to the extent that many of them felt that we have not been freed, but we have been further enslaved now through the legislature. So, as we know from the subsequent events, this Bill of Rights will become a law in 1965 after Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement. President Lyndon Johnson signed it, and this became a law. So, effectively, we can say that the voting rights, and perhaps for the first time, the blacks also felt that we, the people, also mean us. The other thing that we, the people, did not have were women. Before 1920, no woman, not even white women, were allowed to vote. In 1920, after a long movement, they were accepted. They were given the right. But then the question came, would it include black women also? Theoretically, it should have included black women also, but it did not. Another 50 years before the black women will be allowed to vote. So, this is how the first three words of the American Constitution reflect historically on democracy, we the people. With the passage of time, we the people, the term who is included in them have changed. The second threat to all political systems, including democracy, is that it's not a given thing. It's not a textbook that you can read and see that we have full democracy. It is to the extent that the people who are active in political process, they want it. Some of the finest democracies have been turned into what, again, that French philosopher called tyrannical majorities. When a group of people they attain majority in politics, it takes only a twist of mind, a few words, to turn it into a dictatorship. And we have seen that in Europe, we have seen that in Asia, and we have seen that in the United States also. Why does that happen? That happens because the will of the people who are participating in this process is sold to what we call popular slogans. Political scientists, they call it populism. It's an irony because popular votes elects the president or the head of the state, yet this popular idea can be read, can be misused, or can be galvanized into something which can lead to dictatorship and denial of the rights of others. This has happened many times in the United States. And the last presidency, we witnessed that. How many people, they were not theoretically or legally denied many things, but it was the question of implementing what was on the book. So, this is a very brief view of democracy in the United States, for that matter, democracy in any other country. But there is a small difference between other countries and the United States. Still, it is the state's right to elect the president, not the people's rights. Many a times it has happened in their history that those candidates who had more popular votes, they were not allowed to enter the White House. Those who had more electoral college votes, only they could be elected as presidents. So this is a dichotomy, but it has one good point that federal government cannot influence the outcome of elections. There is no federal institution in the United States which could control or which could supervise the process of voting. It is the states' rights, and the states decide if there is any discrepancy, any wrongdoing. It is the state's right to see whether it is or it's not. So these are some of the issues which Joe Biden had to face now. He will be facing all these questions. To what extent democracy means inclusive, to what extent it means exclusive. You are going to exclude some people from your process of democracy, or it will be all inclusive. Every American would be entitled to benefit or to participate or to further his or her voice in this process. I think that's one of the best part that Joe Biden will have to see.
Thank you very much. Uh, Viewers, before we go and continue our discussion, we have a speaker today, a very special one, and that's why I didn't introduce her in the beginning. Before introducing her, I will go to another point. The Vice President-elect, Kamala Harris, in her address to the nation last night, quoted the Congressman John Lewis, who said, "Democracy is not a state, it is an act." Harris said that, and then furthermore, she said, America's democracy is not guaranteed. It's only as strong as our willingness to fight for it. So I do see a very strong woman now coming to this position. So I will now switch to a very strong woman from our country, Pakistan, whom we called actually best ambassador of Pakistani culture in the West. Mona Kazim Shah is today with us. And I don't have to say a lot about her. All of you know her work, what she does. By profession, actually, she is a medical doctor. But she has excelled in journalism, activism, and God knows what not. Mona Kazim Shah, thank you very much for being with us today. बहुत खुश होती है जब आप सब लोग यहाँ मौजूद हों और हमारे पास इस वक्त बहुत अच्छा पैनल है। तो हम अब डिस्कशन का आगाज करते हैं और सबसे पहले हम देखते हैं कि वॉशिंगटन डीसी में इस वक्त अनवर इकबाल साहब मौजूद हैं। अनवर साहब, how is the political atmosphere over there today? I mean, it's a big change. How do you look at it?
Thank you very much. I feel honored to be included in this panel. I first met Dr. Sayyid Saab many years ago with Khalid Hassan, a veteran journalist and a scholar, and it was arguably probably the best, one of the best English journalists from Pakistan. And Mona, of course, I've known since the days of Bahadur Shah, 50s. And the other gentleman, I have not heard the honor of meeting, but I have heard about him. The atmosphere in Washington, D.C. today, one word, I think, relaxed. It is much more relaxed than it was last week or last month or for the last 4 years. And you could see that on the faces of a lot of African Americans, other colored people, and liberal Americans, gays and lesbians, who have been marching up and down the streets around the White House since the election day. I was there till 2 a.m. on the election night, and I saw how elated, how liberated they felt when the first results came in indicating that Biden was winning, and then the results changed, and it seemed as if Trump is going to retain the second term as well. And you could see how it seemed as if the life had been taken out of their bodies. The way these people just deflated, they just sort of subdued, and all of a sudden, all the music, all the singing stopped, the fire was stopped, and the immediate reaction was like, "Oh my God!" So 4 more years of Trump, and they are the ones, particularly the African Americans living in and around Washington D.C. Washington D.C. still has more African Americans than whites and other people of other ethnic background. Washington has an African American mayor who led the campaign against Trump. So these are the ones who probably felt the most targeted. It is still common. I mean, we see it like 2 or 3 times a month. An African American driving an expensive car is stopped by the police. They demand to see his license, car papers, etc. African Americans being handcuffed, African Americans arrested for having sort of small quantities of drugs, although some of the drugs are now legal in Washington D.C. So I mean, let's acknowledge that even South Asians living in America are biased, or they discriminate against African Americans. So for them, this election was sort of referendum on whether they also were Americans or not. And now they feel as if the nation has once again included them in the larger community. They're part of the nation now. And I think if Trump decides to continue on the path that he just tweeted like an hour ago, saying that this election has been stolen and that he's not going to concede. If he decides to go for a clash, and it can get very ugly, and we can see fights on the streets of Washington, especially in and around the White House. But what we are hearing from sources in the White House is that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, and other senior aides in the White House have formed a group, not or a team of people who are trying to persuade Trump to concede, and we are all hoping that sanity will prevail and he will actually give in and accept the result of this election and save America from more troubles.
Thank you very much. We'll continue the discussion. आपकी आवाज थोड़ी सी कट रही थी आखिर में अनवर साहब. हम अभी फिर मजीद इस पे डीपली बहस में आते हैं. हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं अब्दुल सत्तार. सत्तार, can you hear me?
जी आ रही है.
जी. So how do you look at the new situation in the US, और खास तौर से do you think that the Democrats have got a chance to prove themselves better than before, or they have lots of challenges? And if you see the challenges, आप उसको किस तरह define करेंगे? कौन से challenges हैं जो Joe Biden के लिए really मुश्किल पैदा कर सकते हैं?
I think there are a number of challenges. Naturally, he has talked about a summit that is going to be held on democracy. He has talked about a global summit on democracy that he says will be held, and he has talked about independence of judiciary and freedom of press. And of course, he wants a world unlike Trump that is run by rule-based system. That rule-based system evolved in the aftermath of Second World War, and where United States and the European countries, they sort of collaborated and they ran it to a great extent. So of course there are challenges. Israel, for instance, Israel has been carrying out a lot of activities that many experts of international relation and international law would describe as illegal. For instance, settlement in the occupied territory. So this would be a big challenge because Trump was very close to the Israeli lobby or the Zionist lobby, and he did everything. Then Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchs, what type of relations Joe Biden wants to have with him? No matter how tall claims you make, or no matter how tall claims any American president makes, when it comes to Middle East, they all go there. They all try to appease these tyrants, these monarchs who have been suppressing fundamental rights of people, of their own masses, and all the claims of the American politician about human rights and fundamental rights. When it comes to Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern states, such claims only fly in the face of so the situation flies in the face of such claims. And interestingly, the United Kingdom, that is one of the biggest champions of democracy, they had the two biggest arm deals in their history, Al Yamama and then the Eurojet deal. Both were struck with Saudi Arabia. America had two biggest arms deal in its history, and during the time of Obama, who claimed to be a champion of human rights, who claimed to be a champion of democracy, and he also had to go to Saudi Arabia, and Trump did the same thing. So when you talk about the rule of law, when you talk about democracy, why not begin it from Middle East? I mean, we all know what has been happening in Yemen. One of the biggest humanitarian catastrophe has been unfolding in that impoverished country, and United States and its allies have been arming Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other countries. Then there are challenges inside the United States, like no president has ever summoned enough courage to challenge the power of corporations and military industrial complex. What one of the American presidents said before his farewell address, that a day might come when American democracy would be hijacked by a military industrial complex. And in reality, this seems to be the case. No matter you have Democrats or you have Republican, every time you will have some sort of aggression, some sort of invasion, some sort of military incursion into some territory. According to Naval Historical College of the United States, the second biggest democracy on earth has militarily intervened more than 23 times since 1776, and they have supported tyrants throughout the Cold War. So that is the challenge. A big challenge is in Pakistan, because Joe Biden is considered very close to Hussein Akhani, People's Party, and Clinton family enjoys good relations with Nawaz Sharif. So we have to see what happens here. And when I talk about the powers of corporation and multinational companies, you can see that more than 39,000 Americans lose their lives because of gun culture and gunshot. But there seems to be a strong lobby. Bill Clinton during 90s went to Hollywood requesting them not to produce violent movies, but that did not yield much result. And then there are corporations and companies and insurance companies that have been looting Americans, that have been robbing them. More than 19,000 people die of opiate or overprescription. And what do pharmaceutical companies do? They grease the palms of the doctors and all that, and all the American administration seem to be helpless. So these are the challenges. Then of course uh, Trump pulled out from many agreement, be that the agreement related to strategic arms, be that agreement of Paris agreement related to environment. So now one needs to see how does Joe Biden tackles these all things. And I think the biggest challenge would be to stop American military intervention in various parts of world that has produced catastrophic result in Syria, where you have more than 550,000 people perishing in that conflict. More than 11 million people they were displaced in Iraq. According to some Lancet medical journal, it claimed in 2006 that more than 666,000 Iraqis lost their life, and today that figure stands around 2.5 million. So that's a big in Afghanistan, and the effective use of public money on the welfare. For instance, United States is the country that has the highest per capita spending on the medical, $11,000. They have around $4 trillion, according to some statistics, $4 trillion health budget. But most of this ends up in the pocket of insurance company and pharmaceutical companies. So this is a big challenge, how to
Yes.
channelize that money in an effective way.
Yeah, thank you so much for this very interesting and in-depth analysis. We will come back to certain points again. Now let's move towards the biggest Republican state, Texas. In Houston, Mona Kazim is there. Mona, आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है? जी, मोना हमारे साथ हैं और एक्चुअली वहाँ का जो सिनेरियो है वो हमारे नाजरीन और सामीन के लिए बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग इसलिए है कि रिपब्लिकन्स का हब इतना बड़ा स्टेट, उसमें यकीनन ट्रम्प की जीत तो होना ही थी, लेकिन हम ये देखने में आ रहा है कि जो वहाँ की इमिग्रेंट कम्युनिटी है, मोना आप हमें बेहतर बता सकेंगे, यू आर सो एक्टिव इन द फील्ड एक्चुअली, कि वहाँ की जो इमिग्रेंट कम्युनिटी थी, मैक्सिकन्स, अदर माइनॉरिटीज, साउथ एशियन डायस्पोरा इतना बड़ा है वहाँ पे, इन लोगों की तरफ से कैसा तासुर अब देखने में आ रहा है? क्योंकि ठीक है कि ट्रम्प ने अपनी जो टेक्सास की जो वोट्स थे उसमें नंबर ऑफ वोट्स तो उसको जो मिले हैं वो बहुत ज्यादा हैं पिछली दफा से, विच इज फॉर हिम समथिंग ही कैन सेल इट एज अ सक्सेस, लेकिन बहरहाल जो ओवरऑल जीत बाइडेन को मिली है, इसके बाद वहां पे आप बताइए कि इमिग्रेंट कम्युनिटी के क्या तासुरात हैं इस वक्त?
First of all, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to share this. To share, the panelists are amazing, and I'm very honored to share it with them. Sabse pehle to Kishwar, the thing is that I don't think, unfortunately, the Biden campaign did not focus as much on the Latino community as they should have. Overall, theek hai कि we did get a lot of response. Obviously, he won, so the proof is in the pudding right there. But they should have focused more, and Florida is in front of us. As much attention as it should have been given to Latino community was not given from Biden campaign. South Asian community की अगर हम बात करते हैं, बस कोताही है ये, और कोई reason नहीं है इसकी. It's just sometimes campaigns make mistakes. The mistakes that they made in 2016, they try to rectify that. They were on the road for the longest time. They were until the results were coming. Everybody from the Biden camp was on the road somewhere. So they fixed it there, but then obviously you make mistakes. I think that was one of the mistakes, but gladly they didn't have to pay for it. But as far as South Asian community goes, South Asian community was I would say that the youngsters, 70% of the youngsters, the youth in South Asian community was had their mind set on voting for Biden-Harris. And the rest of them were divided because of Kamala Harris's announcement and nomination as the vice president, because of politics of back home, which does not make sense when you are an American and you're here. It just doesn't make sense. And on multiple occasions, the analysts and the pundits and everybody was reiterating over and over again that the foreign policy will not be affected just because of her Indian heritage or Pakistani or whatever heritage the vice president might have. But for people, sometimes when you have your mind set, it's hard to kind of understand that the situation otherwise. So that was unfortunate. But still, the majority of the votes in the South Asian community did go to Biden. In Texas, the big cities are surprised everybody. Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Corpus Christi, El Paso. So all these turned blue, which is surprising, because traditionally Texas was a Republican and a red state. So we see the tide turning, and people were surprised and not surprised at the same time. So this is the situation on ground over here.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the next round. Here I will put one question to each speaker, and we will quickly go to the conclusion session. So, Dr. Sayed, I want you to reflect on American foreign policy vis-a-vis the Middle East, South Asia. Is there any chance of change in American foreign policy? Because most of the analysts I have been listening to were of the opinion that no matter who comes and goes, the American policy will remain the same. And we have a lot of things to messed up policies in Central Asia, in South Asia, and especially Middle East, as Satar already mentioned. So historically, if you look at American foreign policy, is there any chance to for improvement? I would put it that way.
I think the three speakers after me have done a brilliant job. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, as usual, has really, in one word, he has summed up what this election has done: relaxed. There is no tension, there is no hype. It's Americans feel relaxed. Satar Sahab has pointed out basic things, the foundation of that society, of that country. No matter what happens, cartels, big corporations, they are not going to wither away. They are going to stay, or perhaps will become even stronger with the passage of time. And one thing I think the last that Mona Kazim said, again wonderfully summing up, that irrespective of who is in the White House, of Indian origin, Pakistani origin, or even of an Arab origin, the policies, they do not change. The reason is the policies are not made by the president or the vice president. They are made by the institutions, the State Department, the Food and Agriculture Department, Department of Industry, Pentagon, the big military industrial complex. You think any candidate in the United States can win if they mention that we are going to get rid of all these? No, it's not possible. The presidents are elected. Sometimes they have no experience of running the country or having anything to do with the rest of the world. They need these institutions, and the policies are made by these experts who are seasoned diplomats, industrialists, scientists, or whatever category we are talking about. I don't see any big difference in foreign policy relations of Democrat. The only small editorial point that I will make is that normally it is understood that Republicans are more outward looking, more interference prone in other countries' affairs. Democrats are more inward looking, more looking at the people's health, education, other affairs within the country. But that was also 50 years ago. That has overlapped now. We have seen Democrats and Republicans literally doing the same thing. Rhetoric is different, of course. They always say those things during election campaigns, that we will put this thing right, put that thing right. But the real decision makers are always sitting behind. These are the new faces of American democracy. Many people are happy because they think these are better faces than the faces that they have been seeing for the last 4 years. So far as what will happen, how will they tackle all those things in foreign affairs, I don't see much difference. Maybe if there is a difference, it will be only either on paper, some more agreements, or something like that. No major difference in the Middle East or towards Pakistan or India, because the relationship, as I said, is based on other factors than who sits in the White House.
Thank you very much. Anwar Iqbal Sahab, Joe Biden, the president-elect, in his first address to the nation said, "It's time of healing." What did he mean by healing? What kind of healing was he referring to? And if then there are many scars in that society, can you just point out a few? Yeah.
Can you hear me now? I mean, I change from the
Okay, no,
from
I
the
can
cell
hear
phone
you.
to the computer because the cell phone was not working very well, and I was most of the time while I was speaking, I was focused on the same cell
Oh,
phone,
I'm
making
well, but
sure
it
that it
worked.
works.
Thank you.
So So, anyway, before I do that, I would like to point out two, three things. First of all, Sattar Saab's presentation was very good, and we all sort of have felt the same way about the United States of America since our student days. But after having lived here, I realize that America is not as much of a sinister, conspiring, evil state as we used to think. The American system is a way of working. There are, of course, institutions here, and there are lobbies here, and there's sections of societies here, and that cannot be ignored. And therefore, if you want to influence or understand the American system, then you have to get involved with those lobbies, with those sections of society. For instance, during the Reagan era, I remember I was a very young journalist studying here, and I saw the Reagan administration trying very hard to open up the American market for Pakistani textile products, but it could not because it was strongly opposed by textile producing, cotton producing states in the United States, and the federal government failed to change it. And similarly, when we talk about the Jewish lobbies and God knows what lobbies, there are all sorts of lobbies in this country, and there is no sinister, there is no fraud, there is no scheming involved. Actually, it is legal in America to lobby. You can also come and lobby if you know how to do it. I mean, one community that's proved that it understands the American system and can influence the American system is the Indian community. They are now perhaps the most influential after the Jewish community, or perhaps even more. And when they came here, they were small, they were weak, but they understood the system, then realized that meeting the president or the white president or inviting congressmen or senators to dinner will not help. So they started down below from the bottom. They participated in school board elections, they participated in local elections, in state elections, and now you see Indians everywhere. You see Indians in school board, you see Indians in council, you see Indians in state legislature, and now in the U.S. Congress, and of course now we have a vice president too who is half Indian. So that's the way to go around in it. And all the charges against the United States but are true. But at the same time, these charges can also be leveled against any power that has been a superpower in history. I mean, the British did the same, so did the French, so did the Muslims, did the pharaohs of Egypt. I mean, whoever it is a coercive position. I mean, if you want to be a superpower, you have to be ruthless, you have to be cruel, you have to be coercive. You cannot be a friendly superpower. So you can argue that world does not need a superpower. World needs to do away with this system. But as long as you have a system, you will have a coercive superpower. Now, and a few words about what changes I see can happen under the Biden administration. I think we can see some change in the U.S. policy towards Iran. I think Biden, who was involved in the process that led to finalization of this Iran nuclear deal, so he would like to revive that deal, and if he does, he will have to obviously relax the sanctions imposed on Iran. If that happens, that will improve the Iranian economy, and it will ultimately, not immediately, create some room for Pakistan also to construct that much required gas pipeline and to have a stronger uh, economic ties with Iran. On Afghanistan, I think whether even if uh, Trump had been re-elected, he would not have immediately withdrawn U.S. troops from Afghanistan. But U.S. troops will remain. Biden is not going to withdraw them right away. They will ultimately, I mean, in a year or two, they will have to be withdrawn because it's a very unpopular war in the United States. What I think may happen in Afghanistan is that Biden will respect the deal that Trump signed with the Taliban, and Biden will also like to sort of maintain some peace in Afghanistan, for which he will need Pakistan's support. So Pakistan's role in Afghanistan will be recognized to some extent, uh, but then that's it, not more. On India, the United States will remain a close ally to India because the United States feel, I mean, you see their new defense policy, which is still on the Pentagon's website. They clearly identify China as their enemy number one, a country that they see threatens their superpower status, and they need India to contain China, and therefore India will remain a close ally. But I do feel that this administration will be more open in criticizing India's human rights violations in Kashmir, if and when they happen. But more than that, there will be no negotiations on Kashmir, and there will be no big aid package for Pakistan. We may see some statements coming from Washington if there are human rights violations in Pakistan too. Now,
Thank
what was the question?
Yes. Thank you very much. I just had a point, like I asked you, what did Joe Biden meant actually by saying that there is a lot to mend. He said about something like we have to um, do kind of. He knows that
The
people
healing.
are sore, communities are sore, and they have their problems. So he wanted to be very show his very human face. So do you think he really meant it? And what are the main causes of those scars which people do feel in their souls because of Trump's policies, and especially the pandemic has shown the real face of American health system, which is a catastrophe.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much for pointing this out. You see, this happened in Washington, D.C., what I'm going to narrate now. They realized that despite their best efforts, the number of infections were not going down. And then they found out that it was because there were a lot of Latinos, particularly, and some other immigrants too, who do not go to hospitals or clinics even if they get infected because they do not have legal status. So they're scared that if they go, they will be deported. So the mayor of Washington opened 11 camps in Washington, D.C., saying that these camps will just take down your names. They will not ask for any other document. They will not ask for your legal status. Just go, get yourself diagnosed, and go and get your treatment. And people did in large numbers, and they really brought down the infection. So this kind of healing is much needed. I mean, people are signaled out, people are marked out. You can't get licenses, you cannot travel, you cannot do anything if you do not have the legal status in the United States. And this legal thing was always there, but it was not implemented. Police were not asked to check, were not allowed to check the legal status of a person if he or she was stopped for, say, a driving violation or a traffic violation. But now they do. I mean, it happened to me so many times. I mean, once they stopped me because my tag on my number plate had expired, and he gave me a warning and he said, "Go get your tag." And then while he was leaving, he said, "Keep writing good stories." I was stunned. I said, "How does he know that I'm a journalist?" It was very obvious that he had access to my entire file, and this only happened under Trump. So this is one thing. Then I spoke about the treatment, the way of the African American people here, how they were treated, and then of course is Muslim ban. I remember one of my friends, Agha Saab, who is Mona has met him. He is a marathon runner, and there was a time when he used to run. He has run in each of the 50 states and run more than 100 marathons, and he would run with a jersey saying that he was a Muslim American, and he was greeted. But under Trump, it happened that on several occasions he was stopped and shouted at. And I mean, once in Kentucky, he was stopped, and some people came and said, his jersey said, "I'm a Muslim, I'm an American," and people stopped him and said, "No, that is disputed. We will see to it whether you're an American or not." So this kind of things, the Muslim ban, the discrimination of colored people, the treatment meted out to African Americans, all those things need healing, and I think Biden will have to do that if he wants to unite America again. It's very obvious that America is divided almost half and half. You see, if Trump might have won the election, Biden might have won the election, and he did receive 74 million votes, but Trump also received 71 million votes. So that's no joke. 71 million votes mean more than 71 million people agree with his policies. Trumpism is still alive. So yes, a lot of healing needs to be done.
Okay, thank you so much, Mona Kazim. You are so active in different communities. When it comes to Trump's slogan, "America First," do you think that the young Americans really feel for America first, or they will accept this kind of policing the world through American policies? Is this something which the new generation in America, be it from the immigrant community or the white Americans, do they really value this, that America should be America first and we should be the leader of the whole world? So how does it reflect in the attitude of young immigrants in America?
All right, I'll address both here, young immigrants and non-immigrants. So let me tell you something very interesting, Kishwar. I was on the fields on the election day. We were at different polling booths, and I literally saw the divide between the Republican families. The youngsters within the Republican families were voting Democrats, and the older white class was voting for Trump. And there was literally a divide and a dispute, familial disputes, which was very interesting to see going on outside the polling booth. I saw two cases, and which was interesting to see, because the old versus the new is different. Now, on the other hand, like Anwar Saab said, that we have to be wary of the fact that almost 71 million people voted for Trump in popular votes. So, like Fareed Zakaria's program today in the morning, somebody described it very well, that we are one country but two nations at this point. And that is the biggest challenge that Biden will have to face, is to kind of unify the nation. And it will be an uphill battle for him, especially, given the numbers in Senate also. We don't know how that's going to turn out, but we can kind of have an idea. So that's that. And then, honestly, I don't know if I covered what you had asked, but you do see a divide between the new America, which means younger America, and the older America in this case. The white America and the immigrant America, the white America and the black America. So yes, there is a divide, and there is a sort of an situation here that Biden administration will have to face and will have to address, because as much as the foreign policy and the global politics matter, obviously it all starts from home, and he will have to focus on internal politics also.
Sattar, can you hear me? Sattar?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Sattar, you are also doing a lot of journalistic work. In your daily workflow, you do see how the graph of America-Pakistan relations goes up and down. So how do you look at the future? How is under Trump, under the president-elected Joe Biden, terms, especially on foreign policy, how Pakistan and America are going to now interact with each other?
I think I agree to what Anwar Iqbal Saab has said. I think Joe Biden will honor the deal, but there is a strong possibility of a civil war in Afghanistan. This is the biggest worry, and we need to see that how does he tackle that. So in Pakistan, it is expected. I think he would be more in in favor of democracy. He might be in favor of supporting democratic forces in Pakistan. So we will just have to see, because history tells us that Americans, no matter Democrat or Republican, well, internally they do a number of things. I mean, Democrats could be more into health, education, and other facilities. But as far as foreign policy is concerned, I think I don't see much change. Well, it is true that Joe Biden will try to honor some of the agreement, like he might go back to Paris Agreement. He might be a bit soft on Iran, because he wants to do that because European Union was one of the stakeholders. So was United States and Russia when this deal was being struck. So Joe Biden wants to take European Union along, and this was the case since the Second World War. So he wants to go back to that rule-based system, and in that case, of course, he wants Pakistan to be more democratic. But we will have to see. Sometime their promises are not translated into action, so we need to see that. On the larger foreign policy, I think, as I said, that there are strategic compulsion that Joe Biden will have to just go along, like United States, as Anwar Saab has already said, has announced in its document. It has declared China as one of the greatest enemies, or rather the enemy. So naturally, they will have to ally with India. They are already in a coalition with Japan, Australia, and India. So they are trying to contain, and we need to see that if Joe Biden also follow that policy. To me, I think he will also try to follow that policy. About Pakistan, I think, as I said, that Pakistani democratic forces are pinning hopes on Joe Biden, and they think that in Pakistan, America might pressure Pakistani government for independence of judiciary and freedom of expression and freedom of press.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sayed, I would like you to comment on transatlantic relationship with America. And when we look at Americans' role in NATO and the tussle between America and Turkey, Turkey is a very strong actor, not within the European EU. It's not a part of EU yet. Turkey plays a very important role in NATO and within Europe. So how do you look at the future of transatlantic relationship with the US and Turkey?
I think he will follow what Barack Obama did. A lot of nice words, maybe very nice speeches. He will definitely visit some European countries. Maybe, I'm not sure whether he goes to Turkey or not. You see, again, when we look at the presidents, what Trump did with Turkey was at the behest of iron dealers, iron manufacturers in the United States, because Turkey's iron and steel was much cheaper than what was produced at home. And we think that it was his decision, and he was angry at Turkey for some reason. He doesn't know anything about these trade relations, and so he had to go with that. Now, so far as Trump's rhetoric was concerned, he didn't have to say many harsh words to Europeans when he visited here, that if we are defending you, if we are protecting you, you have to pay for that. I think Joe Biden will not say anything like that. He is much more civilized and much more polite in his demeanor and his intercourse with such people. But coming to that point, is European Union, again, I am looking at American interest, is strong, allied European Union in the interest of the United States? If it is, then yes, of course. He will do everything to make sure that if any part of European Union, any aspect, any leader in the European Union was not happy with Trump's policies, he could come and heal those. Because what Anur Iqbal Saab has said, this healing process, you see, Europe is also considered by many in the United States as a part of America, because America is considered as an extension of European culture and civilization. So healing could mean also that let's mend our relationship with those countries who have been the part of our culture and civilization, and who for some reason were angered or were annoyed by hyperbole of Mr. Trump. So there is a possibility. But coming to Brussels and having to do with NATO, as was the case earlier, I personally don't think any possibility of that. NATO will stay on papers. NATO perhaps will stay. Even Turkey, as a member of NATO, will stay. And what I see is less rhetoric, more thinking, more polite words, more diplomacy than outgoing and telling them what to do, what not to do. This is the only thing I see Joe Biden will do, but he will not do anything revolutionary or radical. One point I have to say, and that was pointed out by Anur Iqbal Saab about Iran. Even any revision of or going back to that treaty with Iran, if a Joe Biden does that, it will also be to make sure to ameliorate those European countries which did not like Trump's high-handedness towards Iran. So it will also be in the interest of their partnership with European Union. So I see American foreign policy transcending into these three dimensions. One, what will strengthen American hegemony? Two, what will keep American partners happy? Three, if possible, if there is an enemy, China or Russia, who will help us against that? These three dimensions are going to stay no matter who sits in the White House.
Thank you very much. Mona Qasim. Mona, can you hear me? Hello, Mona? Are you there? Okay, seems we have lost connection with Mona. Okay, now I'll move again towards Mona. Are you there? Okay, Satar, I would like you to say a few words about your book, because that sounds very interesting, and it has a direct connection with the situation in the US and the world. So what are your theses or hypotheses which you have compiled in the form of your book?
It's a sort of wishful thinking, but I personally feel that perhaps material circumstances force China and other countries to form an alliance and challenge the Western hegemony. So basically, I have suggested a political bloc comprising China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Iran, Central Asian states, and other states as well, like the countries of BRICS. And I have argued that if they try to strike a deal, if they make an alliance, then you could have the two biggest economies, two biggest markets, China and India, for nuclear power. Strategically, they are important. And then you have the countries with a lot of natural resources. Russia itself has the largest gas reserves, so does Iran. And then we have Brazil and South Africa, I have suggested. And then there are 6 or 7 choke points of the world where pro-Chinese governments, or the governments at least they have which have good relations with China. They are sitting there. For instance, Strait of Hormuz, Iran is there. That is striking a deal of billions of dollars with China. In Russia, China has already invested more than $400 billion. Then there are countries who may not be happy with China, but still they are the biggest trading partner. So there could be question as to how could China and India come together because they are rivals. So in Western history, we have a lot of countries that have fought for years and decades as well. There has been 100 years war involving the UK and France. There had been 30-year war as well involving a number of powers in European continent. And the United States itself used to be a British colony. And look, they enjoy good relations. So I think it will be material circumstances because India needs a lot of energy, which can be acquired through normalizing relations with India and Pakistan rather than the United States, because Central Asian states, they are sitting on 30% energy reserves in coming decades. Resources in Middle East are depleting. So in order to become a strong bloc, you need military strength and all that. If you combine the nuclear arsenals of Pakistan, India, Russia, China, so they are more than what the Western countries have in terms of strategic depth. Russia is the largest country on the earth, and China and India also have strategic depth. So does Iran. Similarly, when it comes to economy, they have strongest economy. Like if India and China, they really make an alliance, or if they are close as they used to be during the time of early years of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So of course they would be the two biggest economy. So I have suggested this political bloc comprising the countries that may have the largest army, that may have the largest number of nuclear weapons, that may have the largest markets, a lot of natural resources, then 7 strategic choke points of the world, which are close to either the countries close to Russia or China.
Very interesting. I'm so curious about reading your book. So I think with my gratitude to all speakers, I'm really overwhelmed to see such speakers in my forum, and we hope to have such kind of discussions frequently on behalf of Rhine Indus Global Forum in the future. Before we conclude today's session, I would like to go to a lighter note. Mona, कहते हैं कि हर कामयाब मर्द के पीछे एक मजबूत औरत होती है. So do you think कि जो बाइडेन की जो कामयाबी है, इसके पीछे कमला हैरिस का हाथ है?
जी बिल्कुल. आई थिंक उन्होंने बहुत बड़ा फैक्टर प्ले किया है, और उसका सबूत जो है वो नंबर्स में है कि औरतों ने जो है वो बाइडेन को बहुत वोट दिए हैं. और मुझे फिगर ऑनेस्टली याद नहीं है, लेकिन दे वर शोइंग इट ऑन CNN एंड ऑन ऑल द मीडियाज कि कितना फीमेल वोटर्स जो है वो बाइडेन की तरफ उन्होंने लीन किया है, और शायद उसकी बड़ी वजह एक औरत का वाइस प्रेसिडेंट के लिए नॉमिनेशन था. The rest is, yet to be seen, and let's hope that, already, Kishwar, there's a ton of women, there are ton of immigrant community mein bacche who are already proud of how Kamala Harris, against all odds, wo vice president bani, or it's given a new hope to young generation who are ready to enter politics or who want to be in office.
So, she said that though I'm the first woman elected vice president, yes, but it
not
won't
be
the last.
Yes.
So do we have hope from the other immigrant communities that women will come out and they could really become the second Kamala Harris?
Absolutely. I'm sure
they will like be. You are there, so why not go for it? There are so many immigrants, young
there are who are born here and who have the potential of becoming the vice president or the president of the United States. I'm sure there are many young girls out there who are full of hope at this point. And already, जैसे हम हमारे पूरे panel ने we discussed that Indian community is already in politics and in key positions, and I think Pakistanis have realized it. I wish it was sooner than later, but they have realized it, and इस दफा जो है वो टेक्सास से 118 ऑफिस की पोजीशंस पे जो है वो लोग जो है they fought and won. And there's people in Houston, people in Dallas who have fought for office, and they are successful, and hopefully I'll bring their interviews to you and to different organizations. And then so we are very hopeful that in America will be all inclusive, and the politics of division, the politics of cruelty, narcissism obviously has sort of ended with the last 4 years. And here's to New America, here's to hope, here's to Joe Biden and Harris.
Thank you so much. Anybody wants to add something at the concluding session so that we wrap up today's forum?
Yes,
and I hope you all speakers enjoyed this forum discussion, and hope to have you again for this kind of lively discussion in the future.
Just a message for the Pakistani American community that please do not oppose Kamala Harris because her mother was an Indian. A lot of people say that. Please accept her as the vice president, and
should
work
be a
with
role
her.
model
She will
to
be good
all
for you.
immigrant communities, actually. Anybody wants to add something before I say goodbye?
Just one comment, Anwar Iqbal Saab's honor. South Asians, amazingly, they are on friendly terms when they are outside the subcontinent. I have seen this in Europe. I have seen this in the United States also. So let's hope that they should not look at it whether her mother was from India. They should look at it, she is South Asian, which includes Pakistan also.
Moreover, so a strong woman is there, and she's bringing some hope. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Satar.
I think somebody on Facebook was trying to ask question, but perhaps nobody was there. Okay. So he or she was wondering, I'm from India and hosting you, or it's somebody else. It's Shebi, I think. But there was somebody who was trying to ask question, but perhaps we missed.
Oh, I'm so sorry for that. But next time we will be more prepared for this kind of communication. And thank you very much once again, all speakers, for this wonderful discussion. I really enjoyed it, and I'm overwhelmed, and hope to see you soon on this forum. And we will have lively discussions on other topics, other lighter topics as well. So once again, thank you very much to all of you, and also those who are just watching us, who are our viewers and followers. And this was actually the first time that people came to know that we are going online live and doing this kind of discussion. So it's going to be a regular feature of Rhine-Indus Global Forum, and we will invite more guest speakers and interested people to have a lively discussion on various topics which are of our interest, of your interest of our coming generation. And moreover, don't forget, we are Rhine-Indus Global Forum. We want to build a bridge between civilizations and want to bring cultural milieus closer. So anybody who wants to contribute in this endeavor, please feel free and go to our Facebook site. You can find our work, and soon we will introduce to you the whole lot of people who are going to be our office bearers and who will be our ambassadors. So till next time, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.